Take a trip with me, won't you please? It's 1988. You just got paid. It's Friday night. Party hunting. Feeling right. Oh wait, that's the Johnny Kemp song. If you weren't old enough to go party hunting, like Johnny Kemp in his song Just Got Paid, it's from 1988. Go listen to it. What else could you do as a child of the late 1980s, early 90s on a Friday night? Well, let's go way back in the day and reminisce about Friday nights at the video store. Looking at the landscape today of convenience, of online streaming, easy access to basically anything you could want, I can still say as a child of the 1980s, I never would have thought that there would be a day that video stores weren't a thing. It was such a big part of my culture, my growing up. At the peak in around 2000, there were nearly 28,000 video rental stores in the United States. And when you have an industry that's that big at that time, it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that today there's a handful at most. Think about it. People that are my age or anyone, when's the last time you went to a video store? I don't think they're totally gone, but for all intents and purposes, those days are over and long over. But what was it like Friday nights in the mid to late 80s through the 90s? I know growing up on Cape Cod, we had a lot of the mom and pop video stores, but we also had our share of bigger ones, Blockbuster Video, Hollywood Video. I know in other places around the country, they had Family Video was a big one. On Cape Cod, I can remember smaller video stores that we used to go to, like Video Galaxy or Entertainment Stop or Cape Video or Telerental. These are all very local chains, so those of you listening from outside of Cape Cod will have no clue about them. The best way as a kid, teenager, or anyone from that time period to get the movies that you wanted, if you weren't sure exactly what you wanted, the best way was to go and just browse. It's not that much different than going on Netflix and scrolling, except you were in real life, where you'd walk in the front door of whatever video rental location you were at, and there they were, just aisles and rows of hundreds and thousands of different movies. Typically when you walked in at the front, there would be new releases, there'd be lists of what had just come out, what was coming out in the future, because then they could get you to put down money to reserve copies of the movies when they'd come out. It was usually cheap. Put down $1 or $2 and you'd reserve a copy of whatever movie was coming out in the next few weeks. Because that was another big thing about the video store. You need to reserve your copy because there's only a finite number. Just imagine if you went on Netflix and only a certain amount of people could watch any certain movie at once. In this age of convenience, it's got to be hard for people to imagine that you might go to a video store and not get what you wanted. I typically had ideas of what I wanted to rent before I went there, but if not, I would just wander the aisles. It was all organized by genre, horror, sci-fi, comedy, etc. And if you were lucky, they'd be in alphabetical order, unless people started to rearrange them and then you didn't know where things were. You would judge movies based on their cover art, too. If you weren't sure of what a movie was, you had to read the box if it had a cool image on the front. They still do cool cover art for movies, but it's different when you're scrolling on a computer screen. When you're holding the box in your hands, you need that compelling image to make you want to actually flip the box around and see what the movie's about. If I went by myself, riding my bike or something, I could be in the video store for a half hour or more just wandering around. But if you were in there as a family, with parents, with other kids, you kind of had a certain amount of time. Pick something and let's go. I remember hearing that from my mother plenty of times. But if you had the time, you could watch. They'd have movies on TVs around the video store. Unless it was a really small mom and pop, then they didn't have TVs at all. But you could get kind of a sneak preview of something and then go to see if you could find that box, bring the box to the front, and they'd give you the actual videotape. I remember specifically Video Galaxy, which was in South Yarmouth, and I think it was in other video stores too, but you'd walk in and they would have popcorn being made, so it was that smell like it was the movie theater. It would just transport you to a different place mentally. And there were usually little coolers with sodas. There'd be candy that you could get up by the front registers. There was always this sense of accomplishment when you would get all the videos you wanted. Like if you went in to rent 3 or 4 movies to tide you over through the weekend, sometimes there were deals for renting more movies. But if you got all the ones you wanted, just easy as pie, it was something great about that. But I also liked the idea of renting something you weren't sure of. You were taking this risk, even though it was, $3 to rent a movie. But you were taking this risk, getting something you weren't positive you wanted to see. And then if you went home and watched it and it was great, then you got that sense of satisfaction. I think when I was 13, 14 years old, that might have been when I got my first membership card. It was probably Hollywood Video. Maybe it was Blockbuster. But to actually have a card that was your ID that you could rent your movies with. I had a video store membership card before I had a driver's license. Although it didn't really matter too much in the late 80s, early 90s, I don't think I ever got questioned when I went in by myself to rent gory horror movies. I know for a fact that I used to go with my friend Matt to our local video store. It was probably a half-mile bike ride down the road. Maybe it's because the people knew us, but we would rent these horrible movies. The Mutilator. That's the one I always remember us renting and watching. Look it up. It's pretty gory. But we never got questioned. It was a different time. It's almost like the people just assumed, oh, their parents must know they're renting this. Those of you that grew up in that time, did you ever get, not carded, but questioned about the videos that you rented? I rented R-rated movies all the time, and you're supposed to be at least 17 to be able to watch them. I definitely was not 17 when I was watching Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Another thing that was interesting about the video store experience was that if you didn't have a VCR, you could rent. Some of them had VCRs to rent that you could bring home. Some of them had video game consoles you could rent. I remember specifically renting a Nintendo at my Nana's house. And sure, it was more expensive, but I guess it made it more inclusive that you could play video games and not have to spend the hundreds and hundreds of dollars to buy the console and the game. Going to the video store, it was a destination. It was an event. Sometimes you'd see friends from school there, but you would plan around it, especially in the summer. Parents trying to find things for their kids to do so they'd shut up and leave them alone. Rent a stack of videos and say, watch these and stay in the living room. If you really had your act together, you could call the video store ahead and reserve your movies. Although that was a bit of a cheat compared to the people that actually took the time to drive down there not knowing. Because like I said, that was half the fun. Going there without an idea of what you wanted, wandering the aisles, looking at dozens of different boxes, and just planning your weekend around 3 or 4 movies that you were going to rent. Back in the day before internet, a lot of what you would know about movies would be from what friends told you. Sure, you could watch the critics' shows, but when it came to movies that teenagers are interested in, older people as critics didn't really speak to me. I didn't want to hear people that were my grandparents' age saying what they thought of a movie that would appeal to a teenager. I wanted to hear from other teenagers. So you get your friends telling you what they saw, what was good, what wasn't good. It was another form of social bonding with people. Your video pics. So you'd bring up the empty boxes to the front. The people that worked the register would match the box. They'd get the actual tape out for you. It was typically a blank black plastic container with the tape inside. And usually it would have a sticker for whichever video store it was. So if you tried to steal it, the video would typically say, "Be kind, please rewind," or something like that. because if you didn't rewind your videos and brought them back, you'd get charged a fee. I would usually do it, but it was also thinking, is it really that big of a deal to rewind the tape there? And also, if you didn't bring it back on time, you would get charged late fees. That was another big thing, having to remember to make a trip back to the video store to throw the tapes into the little slot. I can hear the sound of the old printers printing out the receipts that you would get that were bigger, like full pages, that would then be folded and stuck into one of the containers for the video with when it was due back so that you had no excuse. Movie rental night was always a bigger thing, a bigger event, because typically it would be combined with certain snacks you liked or fast food dinner, or you'd have friends over, they'd eat over, come over and have dinner and watch movies. It was this whole social interaction that just doesn't happen anymore. And I hope I'm not sounding like the old man, but it's just something that I miss about being a teenager. Having a couple of friends, we go to the video store, rent a couple movies, get dinner at McDonald's or KFC, and then sit in the living room and watch movies, and they sleep over and we watch the really scary ones late. Even later on in the late 90s into the early 2000s, when it became more DVD-centric than VHS, it was still a lot of fun. Into my mid-20s, I used to rent the first season of South Park VHS tapes that were these compilations from 1997, 98. But slowly with the rise of online videos, online streaming, Netflix, the mom and pop stores went, and then even Blockbuster went. Those of you my age, in your 40s or even into your 50s now, could you have imagined back then when they were so big that Blockbuster would just be gone? What were your favorite parts about those weekends at the video store? I couldn't pick a favorite part. It was a whole experience that was just different. Walking around the video store and looking for what you wanted. I'm not going to hate on the convenience and availability of online streaming, not at all. But I do, even to this day, wish there was a video store nearby just for that experience of going and walking around like that. Maybe they need to make a virtual reality game where I put on the headset and I just wander a video store. That'll be something I'll be looking for when I'm in my retirement home days.